waiting during the technical difficulties. Our presenters are on Skype and on the call, so we're ready to get started. Welcome to the latest installment of CADCA's Research into Action webinar series. I'm Carolina Deuce on CADCA's Evaluation and Research team. First of all, if you're only on the call, you may wish to join via Skype as well to view the presenter slides. And if you're in Skype and you're not hearing anything, unfortunately, you can't hear me advising you that you should join the teleconference. But I did put the information for the teleconference in the chat box in Skype, so check it out there. Before we get started, I'd like to remind all the coalitions on this call to fill out the annual survey if you haven't already. I'm sure a lot of you have gotten some emails about this, and we really want to encourage you to fill it out because CADCA uses the information gathered in the annual survey of coalitions to identify successful coalition strategies and determine what training and coalition development support community coalitions need. We're having a prize drawing coming up for those who complete the survey by June 21st. So if you want to get that prize, you should email survey@cadca.org to get a survey link, or if you have other questions about this survey. The purpose of this webinar series is to introduce coalition members and substance misuse preventionists to current and relevant research conducted in the substance use and community coalitions field. I'm joined for this installment in the webinar series by Dr. Morgan Sperry and Dr. Caitlin Boatwright. They will be presenting on their article, Accuracy of Medical Marijuana Claims Made by Popular Websites, which discusses evaluating medical marijuana information found online. If you have any questions or concerns during the presentation, please go ahead and enter them in the chat box in Skype. I'll be trying to monitor those. There will be time for questions from the audience after the author's presentation. So if you're thinking of questions as we're going along, feel free to type them in the chat box. A copy of the slides will be made available to all participants following the webinar. I just strongly like to emphasize that you will be able to get the slides. So you don't need to ask for them. I will give them to you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sperry and Dr. Boatwright to introduce themselves further and to present their article's findings.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm the presenter now. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carolina, for that introduction. And as Carolina mentioned, today we would love to share our research with you entitled Accuracy of Medical Marijuana Claims Made by Popular Websites. My name is Morgan Sperry, and I've been a clinical associate professor at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Pharmacy program since 2007. My work is primarily in evidence-based medicine, consumer health information, and drug information. My co-author, Dr. Caitlin Boatwright, completed her pharmacy degree at UMKC School of Pharmacy in 2017 and followed it up with 1 year of postdoctoral training via our Drug Information Fellowship at UMKC. She now practices at St. Joseph Medical Center. As you can see, we provided you all a picture of our School of Pharmacy building on the Health Sciences campus at our university. We're very proud of it. Before I do go on, though, I want to make clear that our research findings and/or views regarding this topic in no way reflect the university's viewpoint in any way. So we are extremely happy to be able to get this webinar audience free access to our article. As you can see, there's a link embedded in this slide, and it will be active throughout the end of day tomorrow, so June 14th. Please feel free to share the link with anyone else you think would be interested in this topic. So to begin, I first wanted to set the stage on why we felt doing this research was so important. Numerous studies, review articles, guidelines have been published regarding the various different indications and uses of medical marijuana. But high-quality evidence showing both the benefit and harms associated with the use of medical marijuana is greatly lacking. Combine that lack of quality information on the topic with, in this day and age, information that can be found online at the touch of your fingertips, and we have a great potential for a lot of misinformation to end up in both the healthcare professional and consumer's hands. A 2011 survey noted that 60% of adults use the internet to access health information. 60%. While this survey is dated by 8 years, I can only imagine this number has gone up. A 2015 survey found that 84% of American teens sought out health information online, and 24% of those teens stated that they obtained a lot of health information online. Finally, a 2005 survey reported that 100% of participants 15 to 23 years old modified their illicit drug use after reviewing online drug information. So our worry is that when consumers search the internet for information, it's difficult for them to decide what information is reliable and what information is not, which made us ultimately question how much information consumers are finding on the internet is actually reliable and of high quality. Our primary aim with this study was to evaluate accuracy of the medical marijuana claims made on 10 of the most widely used or popular websites. Accuracy of medical marijuana claims, along with quality of the source material of those claims, is a significant concern because consumers may change their medication management based on information from a single website. Our secondary aim, to evaluate the quality of each of these popular websites, was important since it is a key indicator as to whether information found within the website should or can be trusted. So, how did we determine which websites were the 10 most popular or widely used to include within our study? Well, data has shown that 92% of online traffic will choose a website on the first page of whichever search engine they use. So you go to Google, they're going to pick one of the sites on that first web page. So with this knowledge, we used 3 online marketing tools to identify the most popular and most commonly frequented medical marijuana websites. Each of the tools used analytics, which factored in website traffic and visitor engagement, number of unique views, page views, and statistics. Once the top 10 websites were chosen, 3 medical marijuana claims were selected from each website to produce a total of 30 medical marijuana claims to be evaluated for accuracy and quality. Websites included in this study were either dedicated to marijuana or to drugs of abuse. The target audience of each website included was primarily consumers. Websites were excluded if they contained only informal blogs or forums with no formal medical marijuana claims written by the website authors. Medical marijuana claims on each website were chosen for inclusion based on how recent they were published and if they clearly referenced at least one article or trial. Because we wanted to be able to go back based on that claim, that article that they were, kind of claiming, medical marijuana is effective for this indication. We really needed to be able to go back to that trial as the source of the claim in order to be able to evaluate it for accuracy. Accuracy of each of the 30 medical marijuana claims was determined by evaluating the article that was referenced within the claim. In this study, accuracy refers to whether or not the claim made by each website was presented in a manner that correctly represented the outcomes of the article or trial that it was referencing. Our evaluation of accuracy was based on an accepted evidence-based evaluation process. This process focuses on 10 major considerations when evaluating a human trial. The same evaluation process was used for all articles, although some were not conducted in humans. Now, these 10 considerations that were evaluated within all 30 articles that claims were based on are listed here for your review. When evaluating a trial or study, it's your hope that each of these 10 things are found to be strengths within the trial. When any of the 10 are found to be a limitation, it gives you pause to be concerned about the quality of the trial. So I always refer to these in class as possible deal breakers of trials. One of them can be a limitation, and the trial still can be pretty strong, but it's a good bet that if one of these is a limitation, you have to start really questioning the trial and how high of quality it is. It's definitely a red flag. So of all these 10 considerations we used to evaluate the trials that these claims were based on, there were a few of the 10 considerations that we thought stood out a little bit more as being particularly important for our study when looking at medical marijuana trials. So the first, power. Power is vital when determining the significance of a study when the results are not statistically significant. So any trial out there, and we'll say for medical marijuana and its ability to treat a certain indication, if that trial shows that there's no difference and that really, it's not effective, if power wasn't met, that results inconclusive. So it's a real big factor, and sometimes the authors of articles, they're expecting or maybe hoping some of their audience doesn't have the biostatistics knowledge and the knowledge on how to evaluate trials. They try to tweak their conclusions, maybe sugarcoat them, make things better than they really are. So power is really important for people that know what they're doing when it comes to literature evaluation, to kind of be able to really look at the raw data and see, are the conclusions these authors making, are they really true and accurate? Dosage, that second consideration, dosage and treatment used, well, that is also really, really important when it comes to medical marijuana trials. There's so many different specific cannabinoid strains and the quantity of each that the patient's exposed to that it can really differ amongst trials. It differs in terms of what a patient's getting within the study. Well, can you actually find that in the market? Can you actually, get that same dose? Would it even be as effective as it's, supplied to the patient? So that's stuff we were looking at, as well as dosage formulation or route of administration. So, was it topical, oral, was it inhaled? All very important to consider. With dosing, it can really change the effect of the treatment on the patient and can often not be consistent between batches of product. Lastly, and I kind of mentioned this along with power, but I'll jump down, although all these considerations are very important and we considered them all, that author's conclusions, I think this is the biggest one, especially for consumers and some of the authors of these websites. If they're just going and finding a trial in the New England Journal of Medicine and reading the discussion section or the conclusion section, like I said before, authors sometimes, they spend a lot of money and research making these trials, and when they get to the end and they maybe don't have a result they wanted, it ends up medical marijuana is not effective, for treating HIV. They're bummed, and they're going to try to do what they can to kind of make any little silver lining in their results. So a layperson or an author of a website that's making a claim that doesn't have the background to evaluate literature may read the author's kind of positive spin on things, but not be able to really look at the data and validate, are the conclusions the authors are making in these trials accurate? So that was a big one for us too, and we did see in this, as we conducted the study, that there were many articles that medical marijuana claims were based on that had biased conclusions made by the authors of those articles. Now, evaluation of quality in this study was twofold. Both the medical marijuana websites themselves, as well as the 30 articles that served as the source for claims made on those websites, were assessed for quality. So we wanted to really look at, well, was the website itself of a high quality? Because sometimes you can tell a lot by that. But then also those articles that the claims were made from, were those articles of high quality? And a lot of those considerations we just talked about factor into that. Now, as far as evaluation of quality for the websites, each website was assessed for quality using the FDA's Guide to Browsing Websites. Now, in this case, quality refers to the safety and reliability of the websites consumers are utilizing for information on medical marijuana. So when evaluating a website for quality, the first thing you should consider is funding. The funding of the website is usually available, and most health-related web pages will disclose where the funding came from. But if the funding is not disclosed or the source of funding could be a conflict of interest, this website would be deemed of lower quality. The second thing that should be considered is the primary purpose of the website. This is important because if the primary purpose of the website being evaluated is to sell a product, then the information is likely going to be biased towards the benefits of buying their product, right? Next, the original source of information included on the website must be determined to be of high quality and from a reputable source. It's also critical that claims or information made or posted on the website are being reviewed by someone with credentials to do so. In this case, a healthcare professional who has background in reviewing literature would be best. The FDA also indicates the importance of noting how up-to-date a website keeps its information, how current, because outdated information can likely result in misinformation. And then lastly, that last bullet, it's really important when evaluating quality to know what information the site's collecting about its visitors, the purpose of collecting that information, and how the site manages communications with visitors. And this is all just about transparency. Transparency is best, right? We don't want any hidden agendas of these websites. We want them to all, we want these websites that are providing with information we can trust to be altruistic. Oh, and I do want to go back and say, we really feel, Dr. Boatwright and I, that by using these considerations put out by the FDA, we think the quality of a website can be determined by consumers, the layperson too, even without any background knowledge of the website subject matter. Because these are things that just, a consumer can think about. They may not be able to go to the trial and know all the statistics, but they can look at a website and kind of further gauge, like, what's a website I can trust, what's a website I can't. The quality, then, of the 30 articles that the claims were, the source of the claims made by the websites were assessed were using levels of evidence. We used the levels of evidence to assess the quality. And the level of evidence of each article was established using predetermined definitions. Now, as you can see on the slide, the level of evidence takes a few of the major considerations into account, such as randomization, presence of a control group, and power. Trials that were interventional, controlled, randomized, and met power were deemed to be the highest level of evidence or quality of an article or trial a medical marijuana claim could come from. So our level 1s and level 2s, whether they showed medical marijuana, was effective in treating an indication or whether it wasn't, if that result came from one of these higher quality trials, you feel more that it's more reliable, that you can feel more trusting of it, and that you could take that to the bank. With these lower levels, the 3, 4s, and 5s, those are the observational trials that are unrandomized, uncontrolled. These are considered the lower levels of evidence, and if one of these claims that we looked at on a website came from one of those trials, they're really not capable of proving anything, and so you really don't want to buy a claim based on a lower level trial like that. So next, I'd love to turn it over to my co-author, Dr. Boatwright, and she can go over our findings for you.
Thank you, Dr. Sperry. So first I want to go over just kind of what kind of claims we looked at. So of the 30 medical marijuana claims that we evaluated, a wide variety of topics were discussed. The most commonly discussed topic was the use of medical marijuana for HIV and AIDS, and then a few topics appeared in 2 or 3 medical marijuana claims, and those included the use of medical marijuana in decreasing high blood pressure, decreasing the number of people addicted to opioids, reducing migraine frequency, decreasing stroke risk, treating cancer, treating Parkinson's disease, and determining if marijuana can harm the kidneys. Lastly, there were some outlying topics that were discussed, each in one medical marijuana claim, and those included things like treating ADHD, treating liver disease, treating acute ischemic stroke, treating pancreatitis, increasing survival in trauma patients, treating seizures, which surprisingly was actually only in one study because, as you guys probably know, that the seizure treatment is actually one of the most widely studied indications. And then there was also a claim that we looked at. They were looking at determining if marijuana increases anxiety. Moving into the accuracy results, this chart depicts the conclusions that were made by the website authors within each medical marijuana claim.
So this chart actually doesn't include the level 1 and level 2 studies because there were 3 level 1 and level 2 trials, and those all had statistically significant results. So we can get cause and effect conclusions from those. This chart also doesn't include the review articles that were referenced. So to better understand this slide, it's important to remember that when looking at these lower quality studies, that the cause and effect associations cannot be made. So for example, the studies that we looked at that are the lower quality, they cannot state that marijuana can cause reduced pain, but we could get a conclusion that says something similar to marijuana appears that it might reduce pain. And then we would also need a higher quality study to definitively determine a cause and effect association between pain and marijuana. So back to this chart, of these 25 medical marijuana claims, only 5 made accurate claims when referencing their respective articles. So we thought this was huge. Only 5 of those 25 medical marijuana claims. And more importantly to note, only 1 website made appropriate cause and effect conclusions from the 3 claims that we reviewed, and this actually ended up being the government-funded website. Continuing with the accuracy results, another important consideration when discussing a medical marijuana claim is whether or not the original article that they referenced used consistent marijuana formulation and dosing for all patients that were included. So a total of 8 articles used consistent dosing, and as you can see from the chart, it was all 3 of the animal trials, both of the in vitro trials, but more importantly to note, only 3 of the 25 human articles used consistent dosing, administration, and formulation of cannabis. Moving into the quality results, this chart depicts the level of evidence of each original publication that the medical marijuana claims cited. The levels of evidence, as Dr. Sperry mentioned earlier, are important to determine the quality of the articles that the medical marijuana claims were based on. So for reference, the levels of evidence that were used are defined below in the chart at the bottom of this slide. And just to remind you, trials that were interventional, randomized, controlled, and met power were deemed to be level 1, which is the highest level of evidence or quality of trial. So this chart shows that 90% or 27 of the 30 medical marijuana claims came from original publications that were considered to be low quality. So again, those are the level 3 through 5, in vitro studies, animal studies, and review articles. So 90% were low quality. As for the quality of each website, as Dr. Sperry mentioned earlier, the FDA published their guide for consumers when browsing websites to help them determine the quality of websites. So when looking at each of the 10 websites, they were funded through a variety of avenues. Some were solely funded through sales of merchandise and products. Others were funded through advertisements on each page within the website. One was solely government funded, and then the rest relied on money from donations and investors. The primary purpose of 8 of the 10 websites was to inform the audience, which leaves the other 2, the primary purpose of them was to sell merchandise and other products. And we found that none of the websites disclosed if their information was reviewed by a healthcare professional, which, as Dr. Sperry mentioned earlier, is very important because if you don't know who is reviewing the information, you, again, can't tell how reliable it is. The biggest perceived limitation is the small size of this study, especially when looking at the immense number of resources available to consumers on the internet. Although only 10 websites were evaluated in this study, this still presents the accuracy of information that is most commonly accessed online. Again, as Dr. Sperry mentioned earlier, recent data shows that 92% of internet users will click on websites that are listed on the first Google search results page. So while it might not be possible to evaluate all information available, evaluating the top 10 most commonly used websites gives us a good picture of the accuracy and quality of information that consumers are accessing online most frequently. This is especially true since 9 of the 10 websites reviewed had at least one major accuracy problem when we were looking at the medical marijuana claims. A second limitation of this study was the rate that the websites are changing and being updated. The medical marijuana claims were selected based on the most recently published claims, and those claims were identified as ones that appeared first on that day that they were selected. So although this process was obviously put in place to limit bias, the claim that was first on the web page could vary from day to day. Previous work on the accuracy and quality of medical marijuana information available to consumers is very limited. While there have been studies that look at the types and frequency of health claims medical marijuana websites make, no prior research investigating whether or not those claims were actually accurate was located. One recent survey found that 65% of users seek information regarding the use of medical marijuana using an internet search engine. And recent studies show that online marijuana advertising is becoming more and more common, and this suggests the need for surveillance of this advertising. At this point in time, anyone can set up a website and publish any kind of data, which is then accessible to everyone. Overall, inaccurate claims were made from 76% of animal, in vitro, and observational trials. We thought this was huge, so 3/4 of them that we looked at were inaccurate. These claims were considered inaccurate because they were based on trials where cause and effect associations cannot be drawn from humans. So of the 30 articles referenced in this evaluation, only 3 were randomized trials of high quality. So that means that only 3 of the trials would actually be able to have a cause and effect association drawn from them. Our study results confirm a need for increased surveillance and regulation when it comes to the accuracy and quality of claims that can be made on these sites. Of the 30 claims that were reviewed, only 1 was reportedly written by a healthcare professional. So some of the websites didn't even report the author's names, and then when the author's name was reported, a lot of times their credentials were not reported, so it was difficult to tell what kind of credentials the authors had. Misleading and inaccurate information found by consumers on the internet can lead to misuse of marijuana and major safety implications. Of the medical marijuana claims analyzed, it was observed that most websites underestimate safety concerns and overestimate the efficacy of medical marijuana use. Many of the safety issues surrounding medical marijuana use are dependent on whether patients are using THC, which is the tetrahydrocannabidiol, or CBD, cannabidiol, because these are very different from each other. While CBD appears to have a relatively safe side effect profile, THC has been linked to short and long-term adverse effects, in addition to the quote-unquote high that can be obtained from THC products. It has also been found to cause anxiety, psychosis, cognitive impairment, heart and reproductive issues, breathing problems, cancer, and dependence, and those are just to name a few. So misuse of this product could potentially intensify one or all of these effects. Drug interactions are also a major concern for patients using medical marijuana because it's heavily metabolized by cytochrome P450 enzymes, and this fact isn't mentioned on many of the websites that tout the product. In fact, websites included this study rarely advise consumers about possible adverse effects, warnings, contraindications, and interactions. Another important consideration is that our study focused on claims made on websites that actually cited the articles that they were getting their information from. Numerous websites that did not give any reference to this study that they were using we were not able to use because there was no way for us to be able to tell where they were getting their information from. Website visitors, consumers assume information is reliable, so websites introduce a conflict of interest when they advertise on the same page that they claim to be disseminating factual health information. Moving forward, it's important for writers of these medical marijuana claims to have some evidence-based training. Along with the authors, healthcare professionals and consumers should be trained to look for reliable sources for medical information. It's also important to only report facts and not allow any bias to be introduced when making these online claims. Everyone should be proactive when evaluating evidence behind medical information found online, and there should be education regarding when it might be useful to look online for this health-related information or when it's better to seek advice from a healthcare professional. Future research should be focused on better regulation and standardization of medical marijuana websites in order to ensure accurate information is being presented to patients and consumers. So considering the growing popularity of medical marijuana and the increasing number of states in the United States that are legalizing the use of medical marijuana, the inquiries regarding the effectiveness and safety are probably not going to slow down. So this study showed that only 1 of the 10 websites made appropriate conclusions regarding the use of medical marijuana. Knowing that many websites are providing this misleading information, it's very important that healthcare professionals are aware that patients are using the internet to obtain health-related information. Ultimately, consumers must be educated about pitfalls of seeking medical advice from website claims instead of using their healthcare professionals. So that is all we have for you guys today. Dr. Sperry and I want to thank you guys so much for participating in our presentation. And at this time, we would like to take any questions from you guys.
Hi. So I'll be asking the questions. Some of them are already typed in the chat box for participants. Please, if you have any questions, now's the time to start typing them. And I'm actually going to start, instead of with my questions, a question that's in the chat box, because I think it'll be easier to just go back and answer that now. When you were talking about drug interactions, Gilbert has a question, what is cytochrome 450? And I guess to add on, like, what does it do in the body, and why is it important that it interacts with medical marijuana?
This is Dr. Sperry. It is an enzyme pathway that, I mean, all drugs have to get, any medication you take, any illicit drug you use, it has to be broken down and metabolized by the body. And so there's something called a cytochrome P450 kind of enzyme pathway. And there's many different cytochromes, but the P450 is kind of the biggest and has the most interactions with a lot of drugs. And mainly, if I was just really boiling it down, if you are taking medical marijuana, it affects this pathway. So if in combination with some of your other prescription medications, if medical marijuana is it would either maybe make your medications show up way more than it should in higher concentrations in your body because it's blocking them from being broken down. And so you could actually have too much of something. Like I'm just going to say, let's say you're on a cholesterol drug like Lipitor. And you take medical marijuana, that could in fact increase those Lipitor levels, or what medical marijuana can do through the CYP P450 system is actually maybe make it that a prescription drug you're taking is not as effective. So it isn't, it's actually inducing it, which is making it get metabolized faster, and so it doesn't really do everything that it should be doing in your body, why you're taking the medication for. So it kind of could do two things. It can make your medication possibly go to toxic levels in your body too much because it's preventing it from getting broken down, or it's speeding it up and gets broken down a lot faster, and so really you don't have enough of that prescription medication that you're taking for a reason in your body to do what it's really supposed to be doing. I don't know if that clarifies anything. That was kind of just a real basic level.
That's very helpful, actually. Very interesting. All right, so I'm going to start with the questions written here. Your article mentions that many of the articles referenced in the medical marijuana claims that you evaluated in your study contain biased conclusions made by the authors of the articles, which could lead the writers of the website to misinterpret the findings of those articles. Could you discuss this issue in more detail? You already discussed it a little bit, but maybe offer a little bit of review, a little bit of additional detail, and then offer some tips for lay readers of scientific research to avoid misinterpreting the findings of any articles that they're reading.
Yeah. So for the lay readers with no background in research, we would actually recommend digging into the FDA's guide for browsing websites to determine the quality of the website. So we kind of mentioned that in the slides. So although the high-quality websites may not mean that the claims are going to be accurate, sometimes it's going to give you a better idea of maybe the motive behind the claims that they're making. So a big recommendation that we would have is to know the primary purpose of the website. So as we kind of mentioned, if it's to sell the product, then definitely be wary of the articles that they're putting out there, because it's likely that they're going to try to convince you that there's more pros than cons so that you will buy their product.
And I would also just add that just educating the lay reader, consumer, that they shouldn't believe everything they read is like a very important place to start, and that, taking everything at face value is an important lesson. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, you guys being on this webinar, you already know that. But there's a lot of people out there that, they go online and they believe everything. So I think just even education right there, that, be wary. Don't believe everything you go online and see. Just because a website you find says medical marijuana has been shown to be effective in treating a certain indication based on a trial, and that's really convincing to people. I know my grandma's called me up, not about medical marijuana, but other things like, well, they said it was based on, this article, and that doesn't mean that that's 100% true. People twist results to make them better than what they appear. So I would certainly trust claims made by a healthcare professional more than I would a John Smith that's just running a website and is a cannabis enthusiast when you're going online. I mean, ultimately, as a consumer, it's really hard because you don't have the training to be able to read the study for what it is. I always say empower yourself and do the research you want online, but have a trusted healthcare professional in your back pocket that you can consult with. Whether it's your personal pharmacist or your primary care doctor, they can help you decide if what you found can be trusted. It's really important to include them in the decisions you are making for yourself regarding your health based on information you read online. And that's honestly for anything, but specifically medical marijuana, because as we just talked about, there could be potential drug interactions. So they need to know that that's something that you're doing.
All right, so this question is a little bit probably has the same answer as the previous question, or a similar answer at least, but your article also just focuses on medical marijuana claims that cite research articles. Do you have any suggestions for coalition members who encounter uncited claims online and want to evaluate the veracity of those claims?
Yeah, so this is obviously a major problem because at this point it's next to impossible to actually verify their claims. So the best way to actually verify the information that they're stating would be to go out and research the issue for yourself. So obviously that's not completely doable for everyone. So people who are not in the healthcare field or don't have research background, they may not know how to do that effectively. So our best suggestion would be to either not use that information or to take that information to your healthcare professional and see what they think.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Boatwright. I start to see red flags when claims are made without any citations or references to the source of where they came from. So at that point, honestly, someone could really make up anything. I personally would probably just move on to another site that's of higher quality and actually at least supports their claim with references.
All right. So coalitions often work with medical professionals in their communities on issues related to medical marijuana. Are there any resources you can recommend that coalitions can provide to these medical professionals in their communities regarding benefits and harms of medical marijuana?
Yeah, so that's definitely a difficult one. Overall, especially after the results of our study, we recommend websites that are funded by the government because they seem to be the least biased. The only resource that we specifically reviewed that was government funded was drugabuse.gov, and because it happened to be one of the top 10 websites that were included in the study. So the other 9 weren't accurate enough for us to feel confident recommending them to our patients. So, I recommend that the coalition should use the tools that they learned from our presentation to determine whether or not the website that they're looking at should be used.
Yeah, I second what Dr. Boatwright said, and would also point you to resources that the World Health Organization and the FDA have available. And actually, I've also recently been made aware of a website called Cannabinoid Clinical at cannabinoidclinical.com. Now, I'll warn you guys, this is put out by Greenwich Biosciences, and that is a pharmaceutical company. So I immediately get like, okay, what's your angle? But I have found it is extremely unbiased, and they aren't trying to push their product or sell you anything. It's mainly facts. It's very well referenced. Currently, that pharmaceutical company has the FDA-approved cannabidiol oral solution for seizures, for seizure disorders. It's Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, but it's called Epidiolex. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that. But that website mainly is to help consumers ask themselves the right questions before walking into, honestly, a CBD dispensary, which I work in a call center, and we get tons of calls about whether or not, these CBD dispensaries are popping up all over, and I think people don't know what to do. There could be so much inconsistency in the products that are put in these dispensaries. So I think it's a great place to start, and it's just kind of like questions to ask yourself if you are kind of determined to buy a product, to make sure you get the safest product in those places. There's also another place called projectcbd.org that I found to be pretty, again, that's really focused on the CBD, like if you're thinking about a dispensary, but that's good too. But otherwise, right now I feel like you mainly got to stick to government websites.
All right, thank you. We're going to start moving into the audience questions. There are quite a few of them. So I'm going to start with one from Gilbert. It says, do we have a clearinghouse that would discriminate what studies are level 1 and level 2 versus levels 3 through 5?
I don't know that there would be a clearinghouse. Actually, I'll tell you, the level 1 through level 5 is a UMKC, like, evidence-based thing that we've developed, but it's pretty similar. Like, all major associations have, like, grades or levels of evidence, and really they all kind of follow those same things on that slide I show you. They want it to be, you want it to be randomized, interventional, you want its power to be met for it to be a high-quality trial. So they all kind of follow the same thing. It's just sometimes certain associations in their guidelines will say it's a grade A, where we call it a level 1. So it kind of differs. But in terms of a clearinghouse, like where you could just go find an article about medical marijuana treating a certain indication, and it would tell you, hey, this is high quality, there's really not anything out there like that. Sometimes if you go pull up guidelines, sometimes that will give you an idea of like, hey, and this is a grade A, recommendation from us. But as of now, there isn't really an easy way for you to just go pull a trial and go somewhere and check the quality of that trial. You kind of have to know someone that knows how to get down and dirty and evaluate it.
All right, another kind of technical question here. Rohini wants to know, how do you operationalize power?
I guess, what do you mean by operationalize? Like, in terms of study design, so when companies create a trial, they, you get a statistician, a biostatistician, a stats person in for your trial that factors in everything you're trying to prove efficacy-wise and creates power for the trial. And that's kind of basically how many people you need to include in the trial to really feel confident that the result you end up seeing is true, is right. And so for us, we're kind of on the other side of things. We don't design clinical trials, but we're evaluators of them. And so we take what that statistician has put in the article and has described, how many people really needed to be in this trial to show an accurate result or show a good result. And we know, because we've been trained to see, okay, they say they needed 500 people in this trial. Well, then we go and look, well, was there 500 people in this trial? And also, you really need 80% power or more. Anything less than 80%, it can't be trusted, because you want it by 80% power. If it's 90% power, that means like you can feel 80% confident in the results you've seen, or 90%. And we really just, as healthcare professionals, never want to settle for anything less than 80% confident in the results we're seeing in the trial. I'm not sure if that answered the question. I wasn't really sure what operationalize meant in that context.
It seems helpful. hopefully. Rohini can weigh in again, perhaps, if it wasn't exactly what he or she is looking for. Question from Ken. Do you know if international-based websites are also as misleading about medical cannabis as U.S.-based websites? I assume the answer is yes, but
yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, we didn't look at the international ones, and we didn't actually purposefully do U.S.-based websites. But obviously, if I'm in the U.S. searching for a website, it's gonna give me probably only U.S. websites. So yeah, I would assume that they're similar, but again, just kind of use the tools that we talked about, and you can sort of determine it for yourself, possibly.
All right, Larry has a more policy-related question, I think, here. How do we get around the First Amendment in getting information vetted on the Internet? And Gilbert weighed in on this topic and thought we should start a rating system on reliability of websites.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'm blanking. There are some websites. It's like, there is a HON code, an HON code, but this doesn't involve medical marijuana. But taking out the medical marijuana, this is a bit of a problem with all information online, and particularly when it comes to health or drug information. And so there was a group of people that developed this code called the HON, HON code, and supposedly you could have your website evaluated by these people, and then if they gave you that HON code seal of approval, you knew when I go to that site as a consumer and I see that HON code, I feel like, okay, I know that this has been verified, and it's all reliable and true. So the thing that kind of fell apart with that, just besides medical marijuana websites, was that a lot of sites just didn't apply for that or didn't do it. So it was so sparse, like which ones got that HON code. But I can see, like Gilbert said, that's a good place to start. If we could get something in this medical marijuana arena where we had a governing body or somebody that decided to kind of be the police. You never want to mess with the First Amendment, but at least, and there's so many different numbers of these sites, it'd be hard to get them all, but if that would be a big thing, is if you had a website about cannabis and you would want to be validated by this whatever code it would be, that you could have that on your website and have people come and feel confident in what the information you're providing. So I think that would be a great place to start, is to have some kind of watchdog group that you could just kind of go to the website and see, oh yeah, they're validating this.
All right, now we're getting into some more general marijuana questions, I think. From Jody, she asks, are medical doctors aware of patients who are using medical marijuana? If so, are they telling them about these adverse effects?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I guess the only way I can answer this is just from, people that I know. And so, anyone who's using it personally, I always tell them, make sure to tell your doctor. And a lot of times, they don't want to tell their doctor because they think that if it's not a legal purpose that they're using it for, that they're going to be told to not use it or they're going to be turned in. But I do think it's just really important for all patients to know that their doctor does have their best interest in mind. And so that's why it's important to tell all of your healthcare professionals, even, pharmacists, doctors, everyone, just because the doctor can help to figure out if maybe something that's happening is because of the marijuana, or if they can, work around it if the patient wants to continue using it. So it's definitely important for patients to always tell their healthcare professionals.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And like that, alcohol or just any kind of illicit drug use, we as healthcare professionals, when we're taking a health history, those are usually the typical things that patients are going to lie about. So I think as much as you can spread the message, don't lie about that. It does matter. And I also, this is kind of off the subject, but I wanted to go back and just clarify, because I forgot to kind of point out with that cytochrome P450 question that we've had. Not only can it increase levels of like prescription drugs or decrease them in your system, also, certain prescription drugs can increase the levels of marijuana and decrease the levels of marijuana in your system. So you could be on a prescription drug, but you don't realize, then you take the medical marijuana, and it actually is really, it's like as if you've taken even more medical marijuana than you thought. So, sorry, just a quick clarification that it can go kind of both ways there.
Thank you, and that leaves a good segue for this next question from Laurel. When you are talking about medical marijuana and drug interactions, can you speak to if CBD oil has the same potential for these drug interactions?
Yeah, so it definitely does. THC and CBD both have kind of their own interactions, and sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't, but definitely CBD does have a lot of interactions, just like THC would. So yes.
Lorena is asking, are you able to go into more detail about the claims that were being shared on these websites, the truth claims and the false claims?
I don't know that we can go into detail, but it would just basically, like, they'd have a blurb on the website which would say, you know, according to this like 2012 trial done by Sperry and colleagues, you know, and give some, you know, information about like medical marijuana or, you know, marijuana or CBD or whatever they were saying, you know, it's been proven effective in treating anxiety and, you know, list stats, and they would reference it. So you see that and you're like, ooh, and I think a lot of like I mentioned my grandma earlier, she saw that and she's like, oh, a scientific study, you know, it must be true. But then, you know, I went and pulled that study for my grandma, and it was one of the low quality studies that like could never have actually proved that. So I mean, it was just, we were seeing a lot of those types of claims where, you know, medical marijuana can do this, and here's the study that tells you, and then you go back and we, you know, try to find the original source, and it would most of the time be like, nope, you probably shouldn't have been saying that.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting because we talked about how some of them were animal studies, and I think 2 of the 3 of those actually, it didn't say anything about it being like a rat study. All it said was like the subjects of this study had improved blood pressure. Like actually it was a rat, and you didn't mention that. So it was just really interesting how they were really good at spinning it without actually like lying, but it was very misleading.
All right, I have a question again about CBD products and THC content in them. Kate wrote, I'm concerned that many of the CBD products that are supposed to have less than 0.3% THC are testing at much higher levels, and that parents in our area are providing these products to their children as medicine, in quotations. Are you familiar with the process of separating THC from CBD, and how likely is it that most CBD products will have more THC than legally allowed?
I can't take you through the process of the separation of THC from CBD, but what I do know is all these dispensaries are getting their CBD products from different sources, and I'm sure everybody's process is different, and it's not at all consistent. There was a study done in Washington State where, you know, medical marijuana was one of the first to legalize, but where they took a CBD dispensary, bought, you know, products off the shelf, took it to, you know, 2 different labs. One lab, the THC in the product was off the charts. The other lab hardly had any THC in it at all, and that's the same product on the, you know, same shelf. And actually what dispensaries can do is they can pick the lab result they like best. So that, you know, most labs are going to pick the one that says it has less THC in it because that makes it more friendly product to buy. But that's the real problem with dispensaries. There's no consistency amongst the products. Another thing that I recently found out, and I can't remember, but CBD oil that a lot of people are taking, it's got to be extracted, and it's extracted using a chemical. One of the chemicals is butane. The other, and this is why I shouldn't have maybe brought this up because I can't remember what the other thing is, but the other thing's fine. I think it might be carbon dioxide or something, but the butane, it can leave residue within the CBD oil, and it's got a lot of carcinogens in it. So if you're buying a CBD oil product that was extracted using butane, you're also putting yourself at risk for future cancer. So the dispensaries is a real big question mark. And again, that cannabinoidclinical.com, I thought did a really good job if you're considering it all using a dispensary for CBD.
We have another question. This one's from Erica Leary. I'm not sure. Well, I'm just going to ask it anyway. Does NSDUH ask why people use marijuana or other widespread surveys? Do other widespread surveys ask people why they use marijuana? My feeling on the West Coast is that the industry is moving quickly to the recreational market like alcohol and tobacco, and by the time the public becomes more aware of misleading medical benefits, it may not have much impact on preventing use.
So what was the question there? Just that her fear that it's almost gonna like run so rampant that we're gonna kind of miss our moment, and it's gonna be like alcohol, or.
I think, well, the reason I wasn't sure about asking this question is I think the question is, do other widespread surveys on substance use ask people why they use marijuana, which I'm not sure is quite under the scope of your article, but if you know the answer.
Yeah. No, I don't know of any. We did do research before doing this just to see if anything was out there on the information online and didn't run into anything like that, but I would think there'd have to be something out there that people, I would have to think somebody surveyed people to be like, well, so why do you desire to do this? Or, what motivates you to want to use medical marijuana or marijuana in general? But I don't know of any specifically at this time.
Okay. A question from Ken about an Academy of Sciences report. The authors identified only 3 disorders for which there is either conclusive or substantial evidence for effectiveness of medical marijuana, and he lists the 3 as nausea, chronic pain, and MS. Can you comment on this conclusion? And then I think he was trying to write something about seizure disorders and non-cancer pain, but I'm not sure what the question is about that, those other 2.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't, go into whether or not it's actually useful in any of these indications. We really just looked at the studies that were included in the claims. So we don't really have a great comment on that.
I do think that, as of now, the only 2 FDA-approved drugs that for medical marijuana are Marinol and Epidiolex. So that's for appetite, right, Marinol, and then for seizures, Epidiolex. And those are really, the only reason why those are FDA approved is because those are the only ones that really have a lot of high quality literature backing them up, that enough that you felt comfortable like this should be an FDA approved product. So I would suggest anything else, like I think you mentioned MS and some other things. Other kinds of pain. I don't know that I think that those, and what I've seen, have the high quality literature quite yet to back them up as like, yeah, for sure. It would just be, I'm sure it's been, I don't know, not controversial, but I'm sure there's evidence to kind of support and refute those, and the jury's still out, would be my opinion, I think. But I'm not familiar with that Academy of Sciences or whatever he had mentioned.
A question from, there's several people that want to know what the government pharmaceutical website you mentioned earlier was. I missed those comments while I was looking at other questions farther up.
I'm sorry, are you talking about like the website that we referenced as one of the top 10?
No, I don't think so. I think when we were discussing what websites they could use as resources themselves or for medical professionals in their community. So I wrote down one was drugabuse.gov.
Okay.
And then I'll email you guys about this, and we will clarify it all, and then I will post them all on the CATCA website.
Okay, that sounds good.
That'll be better. Okay. Susan Short has a question. Do you have any information concerning Epidiolex sales in the U.S.?
Oh, only just the trials that it got its FDA approval, based on. I think there was 3. And, it's a very, rare condition. It's not a very prevalent seizure disorder, but tons are suffering from it. Upon my evaluation of those 3 trials, they definitely were of higher quality. They're not without their little quirks, but it's, it was enough to, prove that the Epidiolex, it's a cannabidiol oral solution, was effective in, reducing the number of seizures in some of these patients. So it provided a strong enough evidence versus any other indication for medical marijuana that it was effective.
Okay, I think we're going to do one last question, which is from Kathy. If the FDA is pulling vitamins off of shelves for misleading claims, why are they not doing the same for CBD products?
Well, I guess I didn't know the FDA was pulling vitamins off the shelves, but I don't know that FDA really doesn't regulate the CBD. So I think of medical marijuana, or not medical, but CBD as kind of like a natural product. So, you've got St. John's wort, ginkgo biloba, all this stuff over the counter. Back in the day, we didn't know when, natural products, that trend to treat yourself with natural products exploded, years ago. In the beginning, it was kind of like this. We didn't know, well, are they safe? A lot of people wanted to take St. John's wort for depression instead of a prescription medication. Well, come to find out, St. John's wort absolutely destroys your liver. It was a very unsafe thing to take, and you should not be taking it for depression. So, and then that's all because these natural products went on the shelves in pharmacies, and they have no FDA regulation. They can make claims, and it doesn't matter. And CBD is kind of the same way. They can make claims on the bottles and stuff, and their FDA is not, looking at all. That's why it's also so inconsistent, depending on the product. Some have more THC than others because the FDA is not involved in regulating these products. So that's why, again, going to that cannabinoidclinical.com does really kind of take you through a lot of the considerations if you are thinking about buying a CBD product, because they are unregulated.
All right, so CATCA wishes to thank Dr. Boatwright and Dr. Sperry for their tireless work in providing such valuable and current material. And we also thank the coalition member participants for their comments and their questions, and also for answering their own questions in the chat box. Thank you, that was very helpful. Remember, if you want to download the article, the link is only valid today and tomorrow. So you can find the link for this article that we've been discussing in the calendar invite I sent you, and also in these slides. And I will send these slides out to everyone following the webinar. And also, this is important, if you would like a letter of participation for this webinar for your continuing education or for some other reason, please email me at kduce@cadca.org. I'm going to also put my email in the chat box very quickly. There it is. And I just want to wrap up by saying the next webinar will be in late July or August, and we'll most likely be on the topic of e-cigarettes, unless I find something very compelling on another topic that I need to share with you. So we hope you'll join us then.